listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside our GM, Mark Dominik, here on a Thursday. Mark, 10 days out from Super Sunday, so we still have a lot of ways and days to dissect this big game. But you and I talked about it, shameless plug, VSiN by the Bucs, here on a Thursday, you and I, about this total dropping ever so slightly. The side has stayed the same. Chiefs are still a point-and-a-half favorite here over the Eagles to conduct that three-peat. But we have seen the total drop, 49s, even some 48.5s out there at DraftKings. What do you make of that move towards the under this early in the week?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that the reason we probably see it is as these bettors have jumped into this earlier, maybe looking at this extra week in terms of preparation for defenses. Gives you even more time to not only self-scout what you're doing, but certainly get a deeper dig into the team you're about to play. And you really get a sense as a defensive coordinator. I'm going to bet that what they're planning on is the fact that you look at Andy Reid, Kellen Moore, whichever offensive coordinator, play caller, and you look over their season. Like, because of the technology we have now, man, can you pull out a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of tapes, and you can start to get kind of put together like their favorite 15 plays. You know how we always kind of script some plays, then you kind of go off script depending on how the game goes. And I wonder if that's where they feel like defensive coordinators might have a head start. Like, there won't be this high scoring from the get-go. Like, it might be a little bit slower starting game, that kind of thing. I got to think that's part of it. Look, two very experienced defensive coordinators. They know what to do. They know how to do it. They've got good units. I think those are the things in play. It's really, to me, I'm still on the other side of this, thinking it's going to be a higher scoring game. Eagles just put 55 on the board somehow, and I know the Commanders turned the ball over, and the Chiefs just put 32 on the board, and to kind of sit there and think that's going to be like 24-17 or 24-14. I just don't feel like that's the Super Bowl. It just doesn't seem like it this year, and so that's why I'm surprised.
Yep, and again, you go back to your point about the Chiefs. They didn't get any turnovers. They got 32 points on their own, if you will, right? They didn't need to get fabricated points there the other way. And the Eagles easily, with that running game, just felt like, 7 touchdowns on the ground against the Commanders in that one. So we got those points, and a lot of those were generated by those offenses. To your point, I kind of see it the same way. So maybe if you're an overbacker, maybe this is the time to get in. If you're an underbacker, and I would assume those points will go up before we get to Super Sunday. You mentioned that this is the week off, and maybe that's why people are getting in now on the under, thinking there might be some time delay. The last time we had where we had the title games and then you went right to the Super Bowl, you know it very well, because that's when your Buccaneers ended up beating the Raiders in the Super Bowl the week before. You had to win the NFC title game in Philadelphia in those frigid temperatures. Tell the people about that and the difference now that we're so accustomed to having the 2 weeks off in between the championship games and Super Sunday. But back then, you had to do it the old school way, and you only had 1 week to get ready.
I guess we were the proverbial guinea pig. Like, can we accelerate this whole 2 week thing to 1 week? I don't remember exactly what the reason was, why it was 1 week back then. It was crazy. We went to Philadelphia, and as Eagle fans, they'd had our number for the last couple of years, beating us in the first round of the playoffs. Now we're going up there for the NFC Championship game. And, so you're in the plane. I'm flying out west. I'm an advanced scout for our team, so I'm going to see the Titans play at the Raiders in Oakland, kind of get ready for that game. As you can imagine, this was unique. When you're an advanced scout, you go to the stadium, sit down, and you take your notes, and you look at, tendencies and signals and substitutions and who's the corner, who's the weak link on the offensive line, who's, how do you tackle who and how, all those things you put together. But the unique thing here is, as an advanced scout, you're there because you're getting ready to play next week. But in the playoffs, you're an advanced scout and you lose, you pack your stuff up and leave. We were the actual first game, which was even more awkward because here we are. There's Eagle Scouts just down from me, and there's, Bucs. And you're watching the game, and Rondé Barber makes that pick and runs back and does the, get on my back. We're going to the Super Bowl. And the Eagle Scout just scoops up his stuff like in a flurry and just shoves it in his backpack and just throws his backpack and just walks out because he's like, there's no point of being in this game, and this is miserable. And I'll never forget, at this time, Rich McKay, who's still president at Atlanta, was our general manager. And Bruce Allen, who became our general manager, was the general manager at the Raiders. And somebody walked up to Bruce Allen and said to him, "You believe Chucky's doing it? He's going to win this thing?" And I remember Bruce laughing and just kind of having a good time, but it almost felt like, well, it was like laughs like, yeah, this is not great. Like, this is, you trade a coach and you turn around, he takes your team to the Super Bowl the next year. It's like, we traded Mahomes and shockingly, he went to the Super Bowl the next year. It's the Tom Brady, I guess, in Tampa, right? He leaves New England and boom, he's the world champion with the Bucs. So that was kind of crazy. And so get to watch the game and everything like that and go through it. The Raiders win, we win. But because there was no week off, our team had to fly right from Philly, which, of course, when you beat Philly in Philly, suddenly there's problems on the tarmac. I mean, they got stuck there for 3 hours because I think the Philadelphia, tarmac people are like, they beat us, and so we're just going to let them sit on the plane. So now they left us on the tarmac. Well, I was told because I wasn't there again. I'm in Raiders. But they left us on that tarmac for a long time just because, right? They were pissed. And so, okay, I get it. But our team gets back pretty late after winning on Championship Sunday. And, we don't have any time. So we have to literally charter a jet for our coaches to fly to San Diego, staying at Torrey Pines, beautiful resort. And then the team comes later, and it's so much chaos, right? This is what they're getting to do now is it's the logistics of everything. It's not only for the players, but for families. And you don't know if you're going to go to the Super Bowl. So now suddenly you're going, but you go tomorrow, right? And so husbands and families and all this are all trying to figure out where's the hotel, what do I do, who else all coming, where are my tickets, who's all, rental cars, all that stuff is crazy. And so we have a team hotel that we went to. Well, I left when the Raiders won. I was able to get a flight that night down to La Jolla and be able to be there. And then the team came in on, I want to say it was Tuesday morning. They flew out early. And there's a team lunch right downstairs. And again, they have to pre-plan at the hotel as well because there's no turnover time. So the best story I can give you is I go downstairs, one of the first people, because I'm there early, and they're serving Philly cheesesteaks. And not just Philly cheesesteaks, but they flew in the bread from Philadelphia to make sure it tasted like home. Like they for sure thought the Eagles were winning. They did not give us Philly cheesesteaks to make us feel good. They thought the Eagles were winning. There was no Cuban sandwiches for the Buccaneers. It wasn't like that. It was Philly cheesesteaks for the Eagles. And the fact that they flew in the bread was even, if you know the cheesesteak world, you know how important that piece is.
So the players knew, right? When you guys are having that team meal with Philly flown in hoagie bread for these cheesesteaks, that had to be like even chef's kiss. Like we're even eating their food. Not only did we beat them in Philadelphia, they stuck us on the tarmac for 3 hours. We're eating all their delicious Philly steaks with the good bread too, right? That had to be a nice little chef's kiss for you guys.
It was amazing. It was a crazy week. Again, doing everything all in 1 week, and that was really amazing. Probably the best highlight of the week is the stuff you've seen. It's John Gruden playing under center, becoming Rich Gannon, making every call you can imagine. We were very fortunate when that postseason when we ran through the postseason, we played only West Coast offenses, and that's what we were, right? So, we start out and we play, the 49ers and win, and we play the Eagles and win, and now we've got, Oakland where John just came from. And so it was really convenient because our defense really was very comfortable within that system, but then also the verbiage wasn't changed a lot. So John really put him, he'd come out there and just start motioning guys around and everything like that. He'd start throwing the ball because, played quarterback at Dayton. And so he wanted to show everybody he could play quarterback in the NFL, but it was brilliant. And our team walked into that facility, that stadium with a lot of confidence and certainly took advantage of it. So it was 1 week, and you'll never do it again because it was too much. It was too hard. But in maybe a way it was perfect for us because everything just go, and you couldn't stop and think we're in the big dance. It was more like we got a game and we got to hurry up.
And that's interesting because obviously Dexter Jackson, the MVP of that Super Bowl, Brad Johnson, a great job calling that Super Bowl. Felt like it was never really in doubt after you get those picks on Rich Gannon. But you believe that because of it was a success for you guys, but even though you guys won big, you don't really see it as being an advantage, that it was chaos, even leading up to that game all week, that will always stay with this 2 week break in between the big game, right? Like this is now the tried and true method. You are the last of the 1 week method, and barring, God forbid, anything we can't see from the country, we would assume this would always be the natural way the game would be played.
Yeah, and again, back then I think the Pro Bowl was after the Super Bowl, so now we can put the Pro Bowl between. So we've got content. I think that's the big thing. Is maybe they're trying to see about the content and making sure that we just don't have a lull. But this is the way it's going to be. It is way too much logistics. Super Bowl is getting bigger and bigger and bigger in every capacities, from halftime to through the whole build up it all. So it will only see a 2 week from now on out. We were the one experience, 20-something years ago.
And it worked out well for you guys, but maybe the league said, no, we're going to keep it 2 weeks going forward. A lot to get to, obviously, on this, but just with that 2 weeks, and I know you only had the 1 week as a GM and advanced scout back in those days, but you saw how it worked out from the front office. What are the front offices doing now? I know there's already practices. Obviously, nobody's down in New Orleans yet, but are you trying to keep it as normal a week in this quote unquote bye week before you get to next week down there in New Orleans?
I mean, yes, your coaches are just kind of grinding. Your scouts. I was just coming back from Mobile. I was in Mobile for a couple of days, and the Eagles and the Chiefs scouts were there. They're running around getting things prepared and watching all the the next batch of the Senior Bowl participants who are going to be this upcoming 2025 draft in Green Bay. So they're still prepping the way they should. The pro departments, sometimes they're at this event, sometimes they're working on their free agency because again they have a free agency just like the draft does, and I think a lot of people only see the draft as like the exciting part, but the pro part's a big piece of this too, because the amount of money you're going to put out there, how you're going to structure your team, what you're going to want to do. So very busy time right now in both departments. So it's just go. You're prepping for next year, even though you've got one more game to play.
Fascinating. Let's get into that when we come back after a very short break here. I want to talk about your time down there in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, what you saw and what other teams are looking at, and some quarterback news in the NFL. We'll get to all of that when you come back with us right here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Mark Dominik here. And Mark, we always say that the draft obviously is in April, but maybe it really does begin at Mobile, Alabama, at the Senior Bowl. You were just down there. We were talking about it in the last segment going to break. And I am curious, what are you guys all looking for? Because I know that there might be different things. There might be a specific player or two that you really might have somewhere deep on your board. But maybe some guys turn heads. Quinyon Mitchell would be that guy this time last year. Now he's going to be lining up a corner for the Eagles in the Super Bowl. What did you see from it? And is the agenda different for each team and representatives that they sent?
Yeah, so it's a little different, but I think you're overall, when you're heading down to these all-star games, you've got to understand a lot of these drills are based for offense, right? I mean, the wide receiver gets to run a route and the quarterback gets to throw, and there's zero pressure in his face, right? The O-line knows that the defenders, clearly they don't run games or stunts because, just do one-on-ones. You don't do two-on-twos. So you know exactly who your guys to block, and you know that they're coming to sack the quarterback. So you're certainly sitting back on your heels a little bit more because you feel like what's going to come. So you've got to understand all those things, right? But it's important. I look at it from an athletic standpoint. When you go to the Senior Bowl, I'm looking for the athletes that kind of stand out. Maybe the wide receivers that make unique plays. I think Quinyon Mitchell really showed up in terms of just how loose his hips were. Ricky Pearsall, to me, solidified a first-round pick. I know people still today were like, is he really a first-round pick? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, at the Senior Bowl, he was basically uncoverable. I mean, he was running routes consistently time and time again. And so you're seeing the athleticism is really the key thing you're looking at. With the quarterbacks, you're looking at the way they throw the ball, the way the ball spins out of their hands, the throwing mechanics. And you're not so worried completely that, if they're spraying the ball or, they have a for practice. You got to remember, even last year, Penix, you threw a really pretty ball, and Bo Nix, but neither one of them looked great last year. You wouldn't go, wow, these guys are wonderful. I think that's why when the draft came around, people were like, well, people like these guys, but we'll see where they go in the draft, and they got top 12. even Josh Allen didn't have a good Senior Bowl, right? And so, it's one of those things you got to be very careful about what you look for. You look for the way they throw the ball, and those kind of things I think are more important. And then the last thing you're kind of looking at is those smaller school guys. Is there somebody that went to a small school who now he's out there competing as a DB, linebacker, running back, O-line, D-line, wherever it is, and how are they holding up? And, Gray Zabel is an offensive lineman from North Dakota State. Old teammates with Cody Mock, who's really had a nice second year in Tampa Bay. He came in and played center and guard the practices I was at and dominated, like shockingly dominated. Like I was, it's hard. It's not easy, and you're playing multiple positions, and you're going against everybody's best. And you're talking about like finding a small school guy who was on people's radar. It's not like he was like, oh, the 6th rounder. But it just goes, again, Jim Nagy, who runs it, he's got good scouts that help bring guys in. And when you see a guy from North Dakota State go, boy, he's had the best week of anybody, that's what you want to see happen at Senior Bowl, because you know how much he's already improved his draft stock by just being able to go there and say, hey, look, I don't care if you're from Alabama or Texas or Ohio State or Michigan or wherever. I know I went to North Dakota State, but I can still shut you down. And he did. And so that was really great to see him do that. Aeneas Peebles, Virginia Tech defensive tackle, showed off in terms of length and being able to move around and what he has. I think most eyes were on the two quarterbacks. We got Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe are probably the two, obviously the two bells of the ball that are the two quarterbacks here that everybody's looking at. I thought they both threw the ball well. I mean, again, if you talk to different scouts, you'll see it from a different perspective. There were some people that felt like, Milroe didn't have a good day. But I thought just looking at him mechanically and his size and everything, it was a good look. Yeah, I think he's going to help himself through this. And the interviews are going to be such a big part of it, because there's, the talk of like, what will he develop into as he continues to grow in his knowledge of the game in general? Meaning the guy's a great worker. He's considered a great captain and a great leader at Alabama. But the question is, does he, at the line of scrimmage, able to process everything fast enough and handle all the calls and what's everybody going to do and make sure that the capacity's there? And that's going to be what he has to prove, because I think mechanically, from an arm talent and a body talent, he's got it. So, I think it's been helpful. We'll see how the interview prep goes for him and when he gets a chance to be on the board with the scouts. And then Dart, he's obviously, a lot of people do like Dart, and it's kind of like a guy that I think is going to kind of slowly move up the board a little bit more as we get through the process, because I think, again, he's gone in there, he's thrown the ball well. It's, again, if you just chart completion percentages, be careful of reading that. This is the first time he's ever worked this receiver, right? He's throwing the ball to a guy from Bemidji State who he's never thrown the ball to before. The timing might be off just a little bit. So again, when you read charts like, well, he was 13 of 25. Well, okay, but we'll see what that means at the next level. So very good week, very good weather. Like that's when you get to Mobile and it's 65 to 70 degrees and sunny. That is nirvana for Mobile, Alabama, because I have been there when it's 34 and drizzly, snowy, and you're sitting out in practice going, what are we doing here? So it's all good.
Sign up the entire Northeast for that weather right now. They'd all trade places with you down there in Mobile. It's interesting because I know a lot of people, it could sound like nails on the chalkboard, and they go, oh, the interview process, does the guy love football? And to some people, they just think that that's all coach speak, GM speak, that sort of thing. But that's exactly what you guys are looking for. We see this now in the NFL. Like Matthew Stafford has said, I'm coming back for 2025. Nobody questions how much Matthew Stafford loves to play football. Even though he's got all the money, he's got a ring, he wants to play. And maybe they don't have those same answers in Duval with a guy like Trevor Lawrence. So these are the type of things that you're looking at. And both those guys, by the way, Matty Stafford and Trevor Lawrence, were both number 1 picks overall. So I think those are very fair things to have in the interview process to try to figure it out. Back to Stafford. We knew he wanted to play. And we all assume it would be in L.A. coming up. Leslie, they're the GM, and Sean McVay, we know the affinity they all have. But, Mark, you say that maybe the monetary issue could become an issue because right now Matthew Stafford, if he looks at the other quarterbacks like a Dak Prescott making $60 million a year, he goes, wait a minute, if you want me to come back, we got to renegotiate this thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's making 27. I mean, you think that he's making half of what Trevor Lawrence, like you just said, another number 1 pick is making. Trevor Lawrence is making $55 million. You go through the list of quarterbacks in the 50s, right? You can help me with it, but Joe Burrow's in that list. Lamar Jackson's in that list. Obviously, Dak Prescott went to the $60 million range. You've got Tua is in that list. Jalen Hurts is in that list.
Yep.
All those guys are in that list. And Stafford's half the price, and I got a ring, and those guys don't have one. None of them do, right? And so that's the unique thing as you're looking at. So the trick is going to be is the compensation, and do the Rams want to do that? And I know you and I have talked about it a little bit. There's one name I keep my eye on. If it's not Matt Stafford, because I can't figure it out, the leverage, it's not Russell Wilson. So I just want to get that one out of the way. To me, what they could do is I would be watching Aaron Rodgers and see what happens with the Jets, because I think we'll know sooner than later with Aaron Glenn. I don't think he's going to fancy around and just kind of, we're going to get a sense of it, whether he's the quarterback there or not. But if Aaron Rodgers gets to the market and says, I want to play and I'm a free agent, or, I'm not a Jet anymore, they're going to let me out of here. I think that the one team that might be the most interested could be the Rams. And I could see Aaron Rodgers, saying, hey, look, I just want to go prove something, and I want to be in that system. And so, Matt might be wanting 55 or 60, and I'll take 35 to 40. I might do a Kirk Cousins, take 40 million because I just want to go and play and prove something. So that it starts a domino effect, right? Because then goes Stafford and play for the Raiders, Tom Brady or something crazy, right? So, but I think that's the one name where great that Stafford wants to come back. But you got to get the deal done. And until they get the deal done, I'm watching what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, because I think that's a sleeper move for the Rams.
And by the way, you and I had a great conversation with our buddy Tyler Fulgham, and he actually, as a Rams guy, would welcome that. Say, if you want to do that trading places thing and bring Aaron Rodgers out there with a young defense, they do have some pieces in place there. It'd be interesting to see what happens. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, that sort of thing. Kyron Williams looks like you have a running game. Boy, that'd be interesting. With all those pieces being there, you really do think that Matthew Stafford could say, hey, if you guys don't want to meet me halfway, there's going to be suitors for Matthew Stafford out there if the Rams can't get a deal done, right? That's where this trading place is, not necessarily just to New York, but then other teams could go like Pittsburgh. Whoa, a Matthew Stafford's available? I mean, this could really set this kind of musical chairs in motion, and I don't think a lot of us saw this coming, really, quite frankly, Mark, until you brought that to my attention.
Yeah, I think it really could start a whirlwind of what's going on with quarterbacks, because the problem we have this year, unlike last year, is we had the draft of 6 guys, and we had Kirk Cousins available, and
right,
Baker made the deal redone in Tampa, but there was so many quarterbacks and some good veterans around that I think everybody walked into 2024 at the beginning of the season for the most part and thought, I think I've got the guy. I think we can win with this one. Whether they're hoping for Will Levis to take the step up, because no one really knew, and there was glimpses there. But then you get through a whole season, you're like, okay, we didn't have the guy, or my guy's older. And so when you start to look at this year's draft class and say, yes, certainly quarterbacks will go up on the board, and certainly we'll see that. But the veteran world, like the Sam Darnolds, Kirk Cousins is going to come available. Sam Darnold's, what do you pay him, and how comfortable do you feel doing that? But if you can start the domino effect of, boy, Aaron Rodgers does want to play, but the Jets don't want him, and suddenly there's that play where Stafford becomes available. Seattle Seahawks could be a team like, wait a second, maybe not. I'll take Matt Stafford, or maybe Seattle drafts a quarterback because of where they sit. I think the Giants could be a team like, hey, we don't have time for a young guy we need to go win, and we need to win now. And we have pieces on this team that we think are pretty good. If we get Stafford, maybe we're in good shape, So you look around and say the teams that are, even the Raiders, are a team that aren't in great draft position, that could sit there and say, hey, if we go get that guy, maybe we can go take a offensive tackle. We'll get Jack Campbell out of LSU because he's the best offensive tackle. We love him. And now we've got the quarterback, and we'll make sure we're going to get him healthy. So it does start a lot. It sounds fun. It may not happen at all, but I'm just saying, if I'm being honest, the way I always try to scout and kind of look at things the way they could play, I would just keep my eye on Aaron Rodgers, see what that conversation looks like, and know that the Rams will use that as leverage, in my opinion, because I think they would actually consider switching it out if it happened that way.
I think it's fascinating. We've seen examples of it in the past. Go back to when a young Eli Manning got drafted, then traded to New York, and Kurt Warner was the guy that was in New York at that point. Remember? And then I was like, oh, we got to get rid of Kurt Warner. He goes to Arizona and goes to a Super Bowl with Arizona when everybody thought his best football was done. So I know some people are out there going, what are you guys talking about? That's what we're talking about. Some of these veterans, like an Aaron Rodgers, in the right spot next year, it could look completely different from what it looked like the last couple of years in New York, that's for sure. So there are past examples of that exact scenario playing out. Mark, fascinating thought process right there, my friend. That's why you have the mind of a GM. When we come back, I want to get back to some other coaching news in the NFL. There's still one job that's open. We'll discuss that and more next year on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Mark Dominik. And Mark, maybe the biggest surprise in the coaching carousel, at least I didn't see it coming, was that Big Mike McCarthy is not the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys any longer. Remember the Bears wanted to talk to Mike. Jerry said, no, you're not talking to our coach. Week later, he's out the door. And now we know Brian Schottenheimer is the new head coach there. Mike has now pulled himself out of consideration for the New Orleans job, which is the last job that currently remains open right now, which feels like it leads the way for Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, to eventually take over that job. Is that the way you read it? And are you surprised that Mike said, you know what, if this is the last vacancy, I'll just go ahead and pull out of this thing now, and I'll just set my sights on next year?
Yeah, so I do agree with you. I think that he pulled himself out of the New Orleans job for a couple of reasons. I think the main one is the salary cap position in New Orleans is not great. It's a tough place right now. It's way over the cap comparatively to anybody else. It's shocking almost. You know, I think Carr's probably the quarterback next year. I don't think that's a reason to be deterred from taking the Saints job, but I do think it's a tough place to sit there and look at where they are and what they can do from a team building standpoint. It's not great. Now, again, you got Chris Olave back next year probably, or should be back next year, a big piece of the puzzle that was missing this year. So there's pieces there, but I think Coach Mike, I think he's probably going, I can take the Saints job or possibly take the Saints job. Again, that assumes the Saints wanted him. But there's history there with him being at the Saints a long time ago. Or, for the next, 10 months, I can breathe, think, relax for a second, get myself right, and then be possibly the belle of the ball. Starting in October, it'll be the name that everybody starts talking about. Everybody's going to start talking about it in August. We're going to start talking about, what's the first team that's going to fire head coach? Because that's it. This year we saw 7 changes. I think next year's more, sadly. I never liked the head coach change. It's tough because it's not just the head coach that's fired, it's his family, and it's the coordinators, their family, and the position coach and their family. There's a lot of guys. It has a tremendous impact when you fire a head coach in the NFL. It shocks the whole building and their families. So that all being said, I think Mike's mindset is probably going, what jobs do I think are going to be available, and maybe at a better option of everything that's out there. Whether it's the Giants have another terrible year and they can't figure it out or something like that. And he's like, look, I'd love to coach the Giants. They're going to have the whatever pick in the draft, and it's a great place to be. Or it's another team that's found a way to struggle themselves. A popular one would be, what would you think of as the Colts? Could that be a possibility that could open up next year? So if you go through the NFL and you start to think about possibilities, I think that's what Mike's doing, and he's just taking that kickback year. And he's not getting paid, but he's been paid quite a bit over time.
So we know that Brian Schottenheimer, of course, the son of Marty Schottenheimer. You know the Schottenheimers, and with your Kansas City connection, certainly through the years. And I got the good privilege of covering Marty in his 1 year in Washington, D.C. A couple of decades ago. And I remember even then, wow, how impressed I was by Marty, just the way his command, the way he deals with the football team, et cetera. The pressure that Brian, you just mentioned it with Mike, he gets to relax. I'm not with the star. I'm not with Jerry. I don't have to do. Is there, of course, there's added pressure for Brian as a first-time head coach, but doing that in Dallas, how do we think this works? And should they really just taken a step back and brought Mike back if Brian Schottenheimer was already his offensive coordinator?
Well, I do think that they messed up the departure between the two of them. Could have they made amends? They could have, come out instead of saying Mike's not going to be back and I'm not going back to Dallas. It could have been like, hey, look, we respect the process. We want to kind of look around. Mike wants to look around, but we're just going to respect the process and see how it all plays out. And I think that if they'd have both taken that approach instead of I'm out of here and I kicked you out of here or whatever it was. Maybe this gets, you kiss and make up, and suddenly it's like, hey, Mike agrees to a 3-year deal because, the grass wasn't greener, or Jerry Jones I'm not mad about what we did. We just had to do what we have to do in terms of negotiations. It just took longer than we wanted. There's an easy way you could have push through this, having known where it ended up. mean, Coach Mike's not got a job, and Brian Schottenheimer was on your staff and could have still been on your staff, right? I think there's other pieces of this puzzle that I don't know for a fact. I do feel like because Schottenheimer got the job over Mike Zimmer that maybe Mike Zimmer walked because he was frustrated he didn't get that job. I think that's a possibility. I'm not sure of that, but I think it's a possibility because he only went there for 1 year. And most coaches don't just want to go do something for just 1 year. It's not built like that usually. So I think there was disappointment there because you could have had Brian Schottenheimer as your offensive coordinator and had Mike Zimmer as your head coach, and boom, everything. Guy that's been a head coach before, and you feel better. But I think Jerry is swinging for the offensive coordinator to stay there. So Schottenheimer goes and becomes the offensive coordinator under Zimmer, and then has a good job. Guess who's the head coach next year? Brian Schottenheimer, and there we go again. So he's swinging. I've got a lot of respect for obviously Marty Schottenheimer, so much so that when we did our coaching search back in 2012 in Tampa for 2012 coaching. Marty Schottenheimer was one of the guys that we brought in to sit down and talk to him because of my time that I got to spend with him in Kansas City and just watching his success wherever he was. Brian's, been in his hip pocket for years, and Brian's got a lot of coaching experience. I know it's his first time. It's everybody's first time being a head coach, right? People were like, McVay, are you sure? I don't know. He seems so young, right? So you just don't know. You got to put him in the spot and see how he responds. So I'm hopeful for him because I like the Schottenheimers. And it's a great opportunity. Yes, there's more stress. It's Dallas. Everybody's going to be watching. There's a lot of people that already came out with their big opinions that he's going to be a bum and a terrible coach. So yeah, that's going to just continue to go. But it's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity of a lifetime to be a head coach in the NFL and to be out of Dallas. I know the success ratio has not been great lately. I know you know that better than just about anybody, but it still has juice. It's still the Dallas Cowboys, and it's a good roster. And so this is a great opportunity. And it's, it's consistency. And I think Jerry really looked back at this and said, I don't want to restart and I don't want to rebuild the wagon. I want this wagon to roll with Dak. I want him to be comfortable. And I want this, I want this to be a very seamless transition because he knows he's got Father Time working against him too. And he wants to get that Lombardi trophy back in Dallas.
Yeah, great point. I'm obviously rooting for him as a fan, but we saw that Dak Prescott was there at the press conference. Dak's already said we're intertwined. Like my success is going to be tied to Brian. So they are invested and they already have that investment. So maybe not as big a shock to the system as others out there might seem it to be. It did feel like Liam Cohen, maybe that was a bit of a shock to the system if you watch that press conference. Duval? What do we make of Liam in his debut? And does that really portend to what we might see? Does it feel over, maybe a little bit over his skis here initially? It's just a press conference and nobody's going to remember it. Kind of like Nick Sirianni's. We remember the press conference, but 4 years later, the guy's going to 2 Super Bowls. Nobody cares about the press conference anymore.
Yeah, it felt like one of those things like he'd probably talked about it with somebody like, should I say Duval in the funny way that we all say Duval around in Jacksonville? And he's like, man, I don't know. We'll see. And then in the middle of it, he's like, I think I'm going to try it, instead of like practicing. So for Liam, it's just, now let me tell you, it's going to haunt him. If things don't go well, don't think that that's not going to be like something that just gets to hang on his back pocket. And if he does well, it's just going to be that thing that he did at his press conference, right? So it's kind of in that situation. It all comes down to, can you win in this league or not? And, that offense has done really well. I think Baker Mayfield deserves as much credit as anybody, but certainly, 2 guys have become head coaches because of what Baker's been able to do on the field. And, I think that also goes to Jason Light in terms of just surrounding those guys with good players, right? The running game's gotten so good in Tampa with Bucky Irvin was such a huge pick for them. We talked about Cody Mock, earlier in the show. That was another pick. So they've put some good players on offense and they've taken advantage of it. So now we'll get to see Liam and what he can do in terms of a head coach. It's all about Trevor Lawrence. It's the like versus love. And is that true or not? Is he all ball when he steps in the door and walks out the door? But when he's away from the game, is he nothing ball? Like it's that kind of thing that people are wondering about Trevor Lawrence. And can you get him to dig deeper into himself and want this worse? And I think that's the debate that you hear around the noise of what's going on. Why isn't Trevor kind of really kicking it up a notch? But that's going to be what we have to see Liam do. You got to like Brian Thomas Jr., great draft pick last year. There's going to be a stud, it looks like, in this league. But, it's a good roster. I don't know if it's, as talented as I think people think, but I think it's a very good roster. You do have a quarterback that, you have to feel like you got to spend some time with them to see exactly where that can get to. And if you can get that quarterback dialed in a little bit more, you have a chance to win. And it's a division that, Houston's had, but you still got the culture trying to figure things out. The Titans are still trying to figure things out. So you can get things going pretty quick, I think, if you can catch up with those Houston Texans.
It's amazing that you still have a question when the number one pick in the draft not so long ago was Trevor Lawrence, but we're still wondering, is this exactly the right guy going forward in Duval? That's the way you do it, Liam. Very quickly with the Jets, Aaron Glenn, you talk about the quarterback, and Aaron, of course, is a former first-round pick of the Jets, played corner there. He was pretty darn excited. I can't use the colorful language he used to really show how passionate he is about being the new head coach of the Jets. But for Glenn, and I know we think defense, they've gone defense a lot of time down there. That really hasn't been the problem. It's been offense. Is that going to be the same problem for Aaron Glenn day one?
Yeah, I mean, I like the hire. I mean, it's hard not to like Aaron Glenn with his energy and what he's done in Detroit and, the success he's had there on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think that they went into this. I don't think Woody Johnson went into this saying, I want to get another defensive coach. I have a feeling Woody Johnson walked this going, offensive player here. I want to get it when I'm going against the Dolphins, when we're going against the Buffalo Bills, I want an offense that can run with these guys. Like instead of I got to find the defense that can stop everybody. And I'm not against defense. I just really thought the Jets would hire an offensive coach, just like what I thought the Bears would do. I think those two teams were the two teams I was like, those two teams will probably just hire offense, but they didn't. They hired Aaron Glenn, who they obviously have familiarity with and know. It just comes down to how are you going to fix that quarterback situation. And I talked about it earlier. We're going to find out fairly soon. But then if it's not Aaron, then what's the plan of attack? And to me, that was the entire interview. I mean, if you interviewed for the GM job or if you interviewed for the head coaching job, did you interview for the head job or the GM job? Because it felt like they interviewed about 600 people. So I'm not sure if you got in there too, but
I did not get the call, Mark.
Yeah, all good. But anyway, they got to hear 30-something answers, almost 40 answers, what people would do in terms of their quarterback situation. So they should have a pretty good plan in place, hopefully. But that's going to be it. But, I mean, I like the hire. It's hard not to like Aaron Glenn and his energy.
I wish they did call me. I'm cheap for GM or head coach. I got a lot of ideas. I don't know how to implement them. Mark, when we come back, I do want to get to age is just a number in the desert for their head coach and maybe in Pittsburgh at the quarterback position. We'll discuss all of that when you come back with us right here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Back here on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Mark Dominik, our GM. And Mark, I guess age truly is just a number if you're Pete Carroll out here in the desert in Las Vegas, the new head coach here for the Silver and Black. And we know that Tom Brady right now is minority owner. He had said, I'm going to lean on Tom. As much as Tom wants to help me, whether it's in the quarterback search, but we're looking for quarterbacks and that sort of thing. How much will Pete lean on Tom? Or is that more just, hey, we've got the GOAT in the house, and if he's out there doing broadcasting, other things, that's great. But when he wants to talk quarterbacking, I'm going to listen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a part of Pete Carroll being able to listen to him and kind of dissect what Tom's hearing. Pete Carroll's obviously been out of the game too, had a chance to kind of look at the different things. And, if he's been hungry for this comeback, he's probably talked to, met with a lot of different people as well. So you got a lot of information that you can gather for them to try to figure out not only the quarterback situation, but what's the long-term plan at the Raiders, right? Pete Carroll, I can appreciate it, but it's probably like what? Everything goes well, a 5-year plan kind of mindset. But what's the transition? Because I know what they're trying to do with Pete is probably just fix the culture throughout the building. Like, hey, look, we can be a winning organization, stabilize it, kind of make it fun to be there, invigorate people, whatever that is. That's what obviously, he's there for. But, you got to you got to add to the quarterback room, right? I don't even know what Aiden O'Connell is still. Like, sure, I want to bring in competition for sure. And it's not Gardner Minshew. It's something bigger. And it's going to be hard for Aiden to, be the starter. But I certainly want to, increase the level of that room there in the Raiders. And I think that we'll see what Pete Carroll can do. And everybody wants to point to Russell Wilson, right? I mean, it's hard not to point that way and say that's a possibility. He is an unrestricted free agent. Pete had to talk about it. He's already been called on, and he did a good job of tight-roping and not saying anything he shouldn't say, but also, not saying he should say. He was right on the bubble of the way you handle that, especially that you can get, fined and certainly lose draft compensation if you tamper or say anything that you could be considered tampering. So they've got a lot of work to do. And, we'll look at how they put the staff together and what that all entails. But, the number one thing in Raider world is, as you know, is who do we get to come in here and beat out Aiden O'Connell if we get that opportunity?
I mean, God rest his soul, but if Al Davis was still with us, I mean, Russell Wilson feels like the perfect guy, right? Deep ball thrower. That's what he does. It's kind of really not even in vogue anymore in the NFL, but Russell still likes to throw those. But we heard that from Art Rooney back in Pittsburgh, and he basically said, look, it's going to be one of the two guys, Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, kind of non-committal on which guy, because really you're not owed anything to either one of those guys. They could both technically walk. You mentioned the tentacles there with Matthew Stafford, which I think are fascinating, Aaron Rodgers and the like. Do we assume that it's going to be Fields because he's the younger guy? Or do you think there's really a chance that Russell Wilson is the guy that's brought back in the Steel City and they say goodbye to Justin Fields? He could be looking for his third team in 3 years. Same thing with Russ.
Yeah, I think for Omar Khan, obviously the general manager in Pittsburgh, the worst thing that could happen was what happened in the Raiders is that Pete Carroll became available and is now looking for a potentially, because that just really crushed the leverage that Art Rooney was talking about. In the fact that you could leverage both quarterbacks against themselves. Two different agents. Well, it'll be one of these two. I don't know who it's going to be. Okay, well, what are you willing to take? What are you willing to take? What are you willing to take? Well, he'll take this, and you can start to just play back and forth between those two guys to make sure you get the deal you want, or at least you know which one you want. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind Mike Tomlin knows which quarterback he'd rather have, but you're still trying to use the other one to leverage off of it. Now you've kind of lost that leverage, in my opinion. You certainly different game for Russell Wilson's team to sit there and say, I'm thinking the market value is market value, because, there might be options, right? And that's all you got to say. And everybody knows what the option is. At a minimum, is at least the Raiders. So, it just hurt. It hurt Pittsburgh. It's going to be interesting to see which way they go. I liked what Justin Fields showed, but I mean, if you're going Justin Fields and you're going to put, the Baker Mayfield money there, you're taking a gulp. Like there's a big, I hope this is right. Right. I mean, I think you have to do, there's a reason why you sat there and go, well, when Russell's healthy and ready to go, he's the quarterback. And they did, and they didn't look back. Right. So, I don't think it'll be Justin, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen now that the Raiders suddenly have, Russell's old coach, even though they, Pete Carroll traded him, got rid of him. Let's be honest. It was he and John Schneider that made the decision. Like, we don't want, we're going to go in a different direction. So I don't know what that relationship really truly is.
Yeah, if they go back to the veteran route, and again, maybe a Matty Stafford, maybe an Aaron Rodgers is available, that would be interesting in Pittsburgh next year with that defense, which I felt like underperformed in that losing streak to end the year 10-3, 10-8. They lose the last 5. They're out in the first round of the playoffs. The Bills, their season ended a little bit prematurely, certainly for their liking. I know your daughter knows all about that. My dad does too. Bills Mafia, they're still a little bit upset today that they're not going to be in the Super Bowl. Josh Allen came out and said he is extremely confident that Sean McDermott, as the head coach, can get this Bills team over that hump. What's the hump? Chiefs. They've been eliminated 4 times in the last 5 years by the Chiefs. That is brutal. I know it's Allen against Mahomes, so it's still the Bills against the Chiefs. Is that newsworthy that the quarterback had to come out? Maybe he didn't have to, and support the head coach? Because I do feel like they're always trying to look and say, could we upgrade a head coach? I think Sean McDermott's done a good job, but I guess it's that Mike McCarthy thing. Can he be that guy to get him over the hump? Because Josh Allen says, yes, he can be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any doubt on Sean McDermott being the head coach and in his ability to lead people, make decisions throughout the game. Joe Brady, I think, had, that's the one that you'd probably sit there and say, I would have rather heard about your offense coordinator and saying that that's the guy that can get us over the hump. Then I'm worried about Sean McDermott. And I mean that in a good way. So obviously, Josh Allen had a great, fabulous year, right? Their 4th and 1s were kind of frustrating after a little bit. You see it a couple times in a row and you're like, what are we doing here? And I know that every Buffalo Bill fan has created something on TikTok or Instagram showing that they're all first downs, every one of them. I get it.
Right.
But the problem is the only thing that happens is that, Sean McDermott gets a letter from 345 in New York says, hey, sorry about that. We might have missed that call. But by the way, the Chiefs won a Super Bowl, right? So it is what it is. It just because you get the first down doesn't mean you're going to go win the game, right? We saw Patrick Mahomes beat the Chiefs or beat the Bills with 13 seconds. So you just never know what's actually how it's going to play out. But I think he's the guy. I have no doubts about that. I think Josh Allen's the guy, and it's going to happen, in my opinion. I think Buffalo's a really good football team. They get to add some more weapons. But I got to think that if they could redraft, they would have had Xavier Worthy and the impact that's made for Kansas City instead of Keon Coleman. I think that's one move I think you'd look and say, could have, should have, would have. And maybe the Amari Cooper trade is, although at the time I was a fan of the move, and I'm not going to.
So was I.
I'm not going to. But man, he just didn't have the impact at all, and I don't know why. And that was very confusing to me that he wasn't involved more in game plans for a guy that can make spectacular sideline catches. It just wasn't part of their repertoire, and I don't know how he didn't get involved. And to me, if I'm the GM or if I'm Sean McDermott, I'm going to Josh and I'm going to Brady and go, what were we doing? Like, what was the thought process here? Why didn't we get the ball to Amari Cooper? What did I miss?
I'm right there with you in the Amari Cooper deal. I thought it would be a bigger impact for the Bills. I know he was dinged up a little bit too in that time, but I'm with you. Kind of no excuses by that point in the postseason. You thought he'd have a bigger frame and impact in the game. But, if Josh Allen believes it, that's the key. And I know that Sean McDermott still believes it can happen there. Remember this time last year, the Jets, in some books, they were the favorites to win the AFC East. Didn't happen. Woody Johnson has come out on record as the owner and said that I have to be a better owner. Now, this is interesting to me. Mark, as a GM, what can you possibly say to a guy like Woody Johnson and say, boss, let me help you be a better owner? What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, better owner. Maybe you're not. I don't know where Mr. Johnson was in terms of like Aaron Rodgers and supporting or not supporting, right? There was whispers of him wanting to be benched or not benched, but it might be those kind of statements or those things where it's like, keep things more private, much more private, and let people just kind of do what they've got to do and see what happens, right? I don't feel like Woody Johnson doesn't open up his wallet. I think he's more than willing to spend the money and try to get this team to where it is, but it might be those opinions. What was it? The Madden rating from somebody, like that's why they didn't like somebody because they're Madden. And the whole whispers of all those kind of weird rumors are what maybe as a better owner, those don't become whispers. They just don't even happen, right? The comments aren't there. Don't say anything. And every owner is going to do it differently. I was around 2 sets of ownerships. They were completely different because again, the Glazer family, it wasn't Mr. Glazer, it was the children and the sons and the daughter. And they all had a part in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as they all do. In Kansas City, it was Mr. Hunt. It was Lamar Hunt. And then it was Clark, right? And so, as they used to joke around, if you want a different answer, ask a different Glazer. Like, that's always been a funny joke. And I'm sure Jason Light deals with that still in a clever way. But it just shows you, but both of those owners are very private, in my opinion. Like, Clark Hunt doesn't go out and get in front of the media. And the Glazers, I think, 2 times a year, they speak, so they're very private, and I think that's what you mean by maybe a better owner. I think that's probably what they're talking about.
Jerry is a different owner in Dallas. He says the conversations with Dion were just that. They were just conversations about his kids, about his life. They were never really about whether he wanted to be or could be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. You buying that, Mark? Because, look, they do have a great affinity for each other. Going back to Dion's playing days there, helping Jerry win that 3rd Super Bowl way back 30 years ago now in 1995. Could it be as innocent as that these are just 2 friends now that were actually talking, just so happened, while there was a head coaching opportunity in Dallas?
Yeah, I don't know about that. It's an interesting story, interesting take. I'll leave Jerry as is. Hopefully he's got the right choice there for the Dallas Cowboys. Hopefully, they finally find their way into the postseason. I got to stop picking the Dallas Cowboys to win. I realize that that's probably my fault now over the last couple of years. That I really thought they would do that. And I probably need to stop picking the Jets to go to the postseason. I did that last year also, and that didn't work out very well either. So I'm going to stick with the Chiefs. Why not say anything but Kansas City from now on? We'll see what happens in about 10 days, but that seems like the only logical thing to say every year.
Yeah, as long as it's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, feels like they always have a chance. That's for sure. Let's see if the Cowboys and the Jets have better days ahead in New York and Dallas, respectively. Mark, always appreciate the conversation, my friend. We'll do it again on Monday.
Sounds good, man. Enjoy the weekend and look forward to talking to you then.
There you go. 10 days, people. 10 short days. We will get to Super Bowl 59. So for Mark Dominik, I'm Dave Ross. Thanks for listening to the GM Shuffle.